Okay, continuing where we left off, and these slides shouldn't take too much longer. I will go over them, try to go over them very quickly. Regarding navigation, okay, your links. Just make sure they're clearly labeled, make sure that they are in a consistent place. Important things to consider regarding ease of use for your target audience. If you are trying to hit the broadest audience possible, I would stay away from flash buttons. Okay? Flash buttons look nicer. You can add sound to them. You can have animated buttons so that they're, rollover effects and all that sort of thing. But people who are seeing impaired, it doesn't work for them. Okay? I would, if you're not sure and you do want to use flash buttons, what I would do is I would also add hyperlinks at the bottom of your page as well. And we'll get to that later, where you just add text, select the text, and then you have the same link. But those navigation buttons or those links at the bottom of your page will go to the same place as the flash buttons. Flash buttons are not readable by a lot of readers that people who are seeing impaired have to use. They don't know what it does. It can't read it. Does that make sense, sort of? I mean, you can see it, and it makes sense to you, but people who are seeing impaired, they have a reader that actually reads the page, and when that page goes over all of those buttons, it's not sure what to look at, what it's seeing. So you need these other hyperlinks, which are just simply text with links to the same pages at the bottom of the page, so they can navigate through your website. Okay? Obvious things, make sure that they all work. All of your navigation, all of your hyperlinks. There's nothing worse than to click on one and you get one that goes to a page that doesn't exist, or with broken links that just simply doesn't work very well. What I will also say about navigation too, and whether it be hyperlink or flash button or whatever, and this is my rule, but I think it's a pretty decent one, is that when you are linking to your own website, meaning just another page in your website, then when that page loads, it will replace the page that they just left. Does that make sense? However, if you are linking, deep linking, or linking to an external website, does that make sense? You're linking to someone else's website, and that's legal. You can do that. What I would recommend that you do is that when they click on that link, that it opens up a new window. And that, when we are working in Flash and Dreamweaver, I will show you how to manage that. It's pretty simple. It's, again, you'll just control that in the Properties panel down there. And the reason I say that, and then if you have, the reason I say that is, I mentioned last week, is that how often has it happened that you've been on a website, you click on a link thinking that's where you want to go, and you keep clicking and clicking, and suddenly you look up and you're not on the website you thought you were. You're someplace else. And then you have to either go back, just click the back button, or look at history or something to find out, to get back to that website. By having that link to an external site open in a new window, for me at least, it tells the viewer, hey, we've gone someplace else. And you still have the old window, the one that you originally went to, there as well underneath. So if you need to go back there, you're done with that link. You can pursue that website more, or you can simply close the window and go back to where you were. Anyway.
I was going to ask, is there a way to, does that avoid the whole pop-up blocker?
Yeah, it's not a pop-up.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's another issue, is that now it's pretty common in Safari and with Firefox, and I don't know about Internet Explorer, but most browsers have pop-up blockers that are pretty efficient. So one of the recommendations I had made, or suggestions, I said, if you want, with some of the images that maybe you're going to display, that you click on it and it pops up in a new window. okay, is a larger image, you know, as a separate large image. But if they have pop-up blockers turned on, it won't work, because that's exactly what that is.
Does that the same thing for tabs too? Like if they click on a link, then it opens a tab? Or?
Tab, well, that has to do with whatever browser they're using. Yeah, that won't affect that. Because tabs are just like opening up a new window. So yeah, tab browsing, yeah. I usually have a dozen of those things open at the same time. So those are my suggestions when you're designing your website, and I think they're pretty good ones. Colors and graphics. I would recommend that you limit your palette, and if I were teaching a painting class, I would tell you the same thing. I mean, if you look at a Rembrandt or a Rubens or a number of classical painters, very limited palette, maybe 4 principal colors, and then anything that they have created, or maybe combination of those in between. So don't use a half a dozen colors, 8 colors or whatever. Try to limit it to maybe 4 colors tops. If you can do it 3, that would be better, because there's that magical number in design, which is 3. Make sure that the color is used consistently. So if you use red for text and white for a background and black for something else, then be consistent with that. Don't swap off unless there's an absolute reason for it, but look for the consistency. Also, color contrast. I talked about that last week. Contrast of any kind to make sure things are readable. And there is a website that we will go to in later this semester that will link you, and you put in the hexadecimal numbers and it will tell you if you have adequate contrast. But I've seen, and it happens more often than I would like, is that I will look at a website and it will have a black background, and that can be aesthetically pretty pleasing. But then it will have deep blue text or deep red text or something on it, and that just doesn't read. It's really hard on the eyes to read, so be careful. The values are very close to one another. So you might have to use a really light yellow or a light blue or white text against that black background. Likewise with white backgrounds, you need a fairly dark text, at least 50% or darker, or, you know, to make, you know, 50% gray to make sure that it's readable. Okay. Yeah, make sure that whatever colors and graphics you use enhance or further your design, your communication, rather than be there for the sake of being there. This goes back to the first weeks of class. Make sure that whatever graphics you incorporate are optimized properly. So whatever images you use, you're going to have to, there are ways in Dreamweaver to set a placeholder for them. And you will know exactly what size it is. You know, pixel width, pixel height. And then in Photoshop, 72 pixels per inch, you make sure that it's exactly that size. Because Dreamweaver, like most image editing or programs, will allow you to scale an image. But even though you scale it and make it smaller, it doesn't change the file size. Oh, okay. That one? Is that right? Okay. So, based on what we learned in Photoshop saving for the web, that will become really critical. Now, Flash automatically compresses, so you don't have to worry about it. You just plop that in there. If you do choose to bring a movie in there, you want a QuickTime movie. If you're working on the Mac as you are here, I don't know about at home, but if you just simply use iMovie, that's a great program to use, that you can take a file and you can export it for the web, and you can determine the size from there, the streaming, how fast the connection that the person has, and it will at the other end, and it will determine how much it has to compress. You clearly lose quality. The videos that I'm recording here, when I take them home and I look at them at high res, they look beautiful, but then when I compress them for the web, they really look horrible by comparison. But that's the way it goes, because in the end, I mean, these things for an hour are like a couple hundred megabytes, 200, 300 megabytes.
Even if they use high definition?
Yeah, it doesn't matter because high def images or high def video is not going to be high def when you prepare it for the web. Oftentimes it will, in the programs, when they put the whatever codec they do in there, in compression, decompression, will probably drop the frame rate so that it's not playing at 30 frames per second anymore. Maybe it's 15 frames per second or something like that. That's one way of cutting. The actual video size is smaller. I mean, to show 640 by 480, which is standard size, is you have to have a pretty fast connection for that. But if it's embedded in your page, then maybe half size 320 by 240 is a good size, and that will work. And if it's really embedded, as I have that little bitty flash piece or that little bitty animation in my flash piece on my website, it's even smaller. You'll see it'll take a huge amount of file size, as does sound. So you really need to make it minimal, or make sure that you use video streaming when you do that, so that with video streaming, the whole thing doesn't have to download first. It's just a section of it, and it starts, and how it determines what it does, I don't know. But based on your your baud rate, it will know, okay, it has to download 10 seconds worth of the video first, maybe, or a couple of seconds, depending on how fast your connection is. And then what it will do is that it will start playing. And as it's playing, it will continue. That's what the streaming is. It continues to download. And occasionally, you'll see that there's a pause, or it stutters, or it stops, as it does here when I show the Linda tapes or something. And that's because what it thought it was connecting at isn't, it's slowed down, and so it has to wait for it to catch up again, and then it can play. But under the best case scenario, the best circumstances is that as it's playing, it's downloading in the background, and that you get a better experience. But also, sometimes when you have that too, that there's a little bit lesser quality. But that it's better to sacrifice the quality of the image to make sure that they get immediate viewing, rather than have to wait minutes on end for the whole thing to download before they can watch it. So we will get to tags a little later in alt tags attributes. When you place an image on your page, for people who turn off images, like people who are blind, when their reader runs across an image, you'll see that there's a place in Dreamweaver to place an alt tag. And what that means is that in lieu of turning that off, it will read, and it'll say, this is a picture of the beach, or something like that, photo of the beach, or something, or self-portrait, or whatever. It will, so their reader will see, okay, this is what is here, rather than, I don't know what image is there. I know that something's there. My reader can't tell what it is. They know it's an image, but I don't know what it is. So alt tags will be very important too. Don't add too much animation. That can become really, really annoying. I'm sure you've gone to websites where they've placed the old animated GIFs on there, and they have these little things spinning around and jumping around everywhere. And animation is a very powerful image, or a very powerful design component, as is sound. So use it, show restraint, use it minimally. Only, to grab someone's attention. If it's there for too long, or if there's too much of it, it will turn people off. It will make it very difficult for people to stay on your website for any length of time. Most of these are pretty straightforward. Any kind of image you use, any kind of audio or visual, make sure that it has a clear purpose, that it's not there just for the sake of being there because it takes up valuable space. It takes up also a lot of, adds to the file size too, which means that it takes longer to download. So try to minimize it. Let's see. These are good practices. I don't do all of them, like for video or audio. If there is a download time, and that will be posted when you save it from iMovie or whatever program you're using, that you maybe post that so people know what they're in for. It's not a bad practice. Also, one thing that I haven't done recently that is not a bad idea is that if someone is going to view Flash on your website, that you also provide a link to Adobe's website for the Flash plugin in case they don't have it. I used to do that and keep telling myself to add it in there, but it's not a bad idea. Okay. Captions too are helpful for people who are seeing impaired with video. I don't do that just because it takes a lot of work. You know, captions for the hearing impaired and that sort of thing. It takes a lot of work. But you know, again, it depends on your audience. If you were designing that for the school here, it would be required. There are what are called BOBBY requirements. BOBBY is an acronym, and it has to do with people with disabilities. And there are features in Dreamweaver that will check your website to see how compliant it is. There's also a website you can go to, and it will go through all of your pages or go through a page, and it will tell you how compliant it is, and it is very picky. And that goes down to the alt tags and things like that. It will check to make sure that everything is there. You know, how much do you use tables? How much do you use this, that? You know, if you're using Flash, it's going to say this is a problem. So, again, depending on your audience, it will be a problem or it won't, you know, when you use things like that. Fonts for presentation. When you're using editable text in Dreamweaver, you can only use, there are just maybe 4 different fonts, and that's it. Did I give a lecture on type in this class? I do that in the other, no. Do you understand the difference between serif and sans serif typefaces? Serifs have the little flanges like Times Roman. Helvetica or Verdana is sans serif without the serifs. It's been my experience, especially for text, a lot of text that has to be read on the web, sans serif works better. I find that the serifs drop out and don't look that good on the web. If you want to use serif typeface, maybe restrict it to subheads or headlines so that they are big enough and readable so that the serifs hold up. There are workarounds for using text if it's really important. If you have a headline and you want to use a script of some sort, okay, then in that particular case, you're not going to use editable text. You're going to use a picture of text. You're going to save it as a GIF or a ping. Or if you've added some treatment in Photoshop, make it, what can I say, to make it more illustrative, that it has drop shadows, that it looks more three-dimensional, things like that, then in that case, you would want to use an image of the text, not editable text. And the reason being is that, that you have just a very small selection of type to choose from, is again, it has to do with accessibility to the audience that's going to view your website. If you choose some unusual typeface, or maybe it could be very common, but if it doesn't fall under these basic categories and the end user doesn't have that font on their computer, it's going to substitute it. And it's going to put something else. So it's going to change the look of your page altogether. And it could change the formatting, it could change all sorts of stuff. So then you might ask yourself, well, if in that case, then why not just use images of text? Well, then you run into accessibility problems, because an image is not the same as editable text. And when a person who is seeing impaired their reader has to, and I don't mean a person, but it's a machine or something that reads, or a program that reads the page for them and speaks it to them, then it just sees images. And so you would have to have alt tags so lengthy that say the same thing as your text that it would be pointless. Okay? So those are some of the restrictions of designing for the web. It gets kind of complicated. Again, be consistent with your fonts, the sizes. Don't change them from page to page. Consistency from page to page is really important. Okay. And the organization, and that's something that we'll talk about when we're laying out the pages. How to, and there are some really old, very simple rules that I think work well for page layout. And it doesn't matter whether you're painting, it doesn't matter whether you're laying out a page for print or the web, that in our culture, we read pages, we read things a certain way. And it will help you if you load your pages that way, okay? Or design your pages that way. So, hold on. Hello? Oh well. Content presentation, minimal clicks. An old rule of thumb, and it still probably should hold true today, is that you should be able to get anywhere on your website within 3 clicks. 3 clicks of the mouse. For us, that should be pretty doable. Supposedly, you're supposed to put the date of the last revision on there, and again, in the copyright information. It doesn't hurt so that when people are going there for information, they know how, when was the last time this thing was updated? You know, is it a week ago, a year ago, whatever? So that doesn't hurt. And there are tools in Dreamweaver too that if you want, you can put it in by hand, or it can be an automated feature. That every time you change or edit a page, it automatically updates it. And it will tell you, this is the last day that it's been edited. And you know, depending on what kind of information your website has, if it is an informative one, if people are going to get information from that, if you're designing something that's a history page or something, and there are current events are in there, people would want to know that, especially if kids are doing research and they go to their web, you know, for school, and they go to your website for content, and they want to know how recent is this information. Was this, I mean, obviously sometimes if it's a current event, they know it has to be there. But if it's more of a general topic, was this put here, that, you know, a month ago, a week ago, a year ago? You know, how recent is all of that? So, typo errors, that sort of thing. Outdated material, try to eliminate that. So you do have to periodically go up and revise your website from time to time. It may only be once a year, you know, but you go in there and to clean it up a little bit, say a few things have changed. And it doesn't hurt too, and that's what I try to do for a website here, for the one I have for you guys, is to provide, it doesn't hurt to provide links to other useful websites that you think are inspirational, helpful, and just make sure that they're clearly labeled, and that's a legitimate thing to do. It is legal to do too. You're not infringing on someone's copyrights. It's another good one too. Avoid the use of click here. Just make sure that the links that you have are clearly or visually clear. Again, consistency. They say standard link colors, and I don't like standard link colors. There are, I don't know if, they look pretty ugly now by comparison, where you roll over it, or you just see that ugly blue when the text, the hyperlinks are underlined. You know, that looks really, really nasty. But as long as you're consistent in how you present your links, it's not a problem. I already talked about that. That's it on that. So you're ready to, this is available for all of you guys. If you just link on the PDF file for web best practices on the 196. And let's do the tour of Dreamweaver. Yeah, if you go to my website, that one. You go to kmart66.com. And you click on Kirk's classes. Then you click on handouts. Then you click on Art 196 assignments. It's the last one down here. It's the best practices. So you can download that as a PDF file and free to use it. Okay, when you open Dreamweaver, and I would encourage everybody to go ahead and open it, because I want to make sure that you have loaded your, well, I'm not going to labor this at the moment, when I'm done lecturing I will. How many people still do not have an account with Tripod? One? Okay. Or somebody that you know that you can upload to. You may have to do it from home. You continue to have problems here. So does everybody have Dreamweaver open? And everybody has their flash drive in there, so we have information that we can upload or actually import so that we can look at your, because what I would like to do is to give you a little tour of Dreamweaver, and then what we'll do is we'll load that site information. I want to create a home page or a splash page, show you how to upload it, save it, upload it to the server, and then view it on the internet. Okay? So everybody's with me? Okay, I want to create here in the middle a new HTML page. If you don't see this here, that's okay. Come on, there we go. And it should look like this, just a blank sheet of paper. So for those of you who have used front page, any front page users? Actually, they discontinued it and they have some other programs. That was the Microsoft program used for developing web pages. But everything was really done in the form of a template. So you just kind of filled in the boxes. This is truly, and it always has been truly for designers in mind. You start with a blank sheet, and then you have an idea of what you want to design, and it provides all the tools you need to design exactly the kind of page you want. And there are a variety of ways of doing it. And we're going to start with something very basic and then move to something a little bit more complex as we progress in this program. Let's just look around the horn and see where all the preferences are and all the tools and everything. Typically, your toolbox for this, if you want to call it a toolbox, is along the top. And by default, the common tools, if you want to call it that, are visible. But there are lots of others. When we switch to layout, if you want to create forms for maybe a shopping cart or something like that, they're there. For various kinds of data, we have various buttons here. The drop-down menu that I showed you on the MMC3, these are spry content. These are things that you can add pretty easily here. That's what I used right here, a menu bar. So if you want to, when we get to that, and we try some of those out, they're not a bad way to go. They put all that scripting and stuff in the background and make it pretty easy to do. Okay. Text info, which we'll get to, and we don't have any in favorites here. So let's go back to common. And why I say that this is your toolbox or your tool palette is it sort of is and it sort of is not. It's not a toolbox in the sense that Illustrator or Photoshop have a toolbox. If we choose to add an image, you don't have the tools to create the image, you have a tool to insert an image. So this is for media right here. This is for an image. So if I click here, and I'll say I want to insert an image, or I want to put an image placeholder in here. So I don't know exactly the size of the image that I'm going to use yet, but maybe I just want to use a placeholder to lay out my page, and then when I know what size that I need, then I can go to Photoshop and I can take down that information and I can create it. So I can click here and we'll call it just, this will be portrait image. So maybe I have a portrait of myself or something on my front page. And I can determine the size here. I can also resize it later on. I can also add, this is what I was talking about, alt tags. I can place that here. You can also, if you want to use a color for the time being, that maybe we want to make all of our placeholders green so that they look a particular color while we're doing that. And maybe I want this to be 300 by 300 pixels. And this is just placeholder image. I click OK, and there it is. It says portrait image, 300 by 300. It tells me the size. And now you will quickly discover, and that's why I'm saying these are sort of tools, but they're not, because it doesn't bring an image in here. It doesn't. There are no tools to create it. There are tools that allow us to create links, to create anchors, to add a date, a number of things that are really just components of a page. So this is a component of a page, but I still have to create it someplace else. We'll also discover very quickly, too, that at the moment, there's only a couple of ways that we can view this. Right now, it's flush left. I can select this or click here, and I can make it centered, or I can make it to the right. And that's about it until we use some other tools. It's not like a desktop publishing program where you can just place that image wherever you want and it will stay there. There's other ways that we have to approach that, and that gets frustrating and confusing. So that's what these are. This should look familiar to you at the bottom. This is our properties panel. And this is similar, and it's almost identical in its and how it's used, what we had in Flash. That depending on what is selected on the page will determine what you see here. If I select the image, it tells me a lot about that image. It tells me that the name of it is, it's a placeholder. It tells me the name that I've given to it, the alt tag. It gives me the height and the width. And right now there is no source, there is no link associated with it, but if this image was in my root folder, it would tell me where that is. There's also the link. If I use that image, you could use that image as a link to another website or another page. It would tell me the URL, whether it be absolute or relative here. And here again is the alt tag. We can add classes to this, which is for CSS. We can also down here add, they call them hotspots, but these are, oh no, I want to say it and I can't forget, I can't remember. Similar to the hit state in Flash, that's what we have with these. We're creating these image maps is what they are. So that you can, on this portrait, maybe you can have a little hot button that links to someplace else. That's what these are for. But it gives us lots of information here. Here's the color that I use for that, and that can always be changed. Maybe instead I want it, red or something. And I can change it from here, and it gives me the hexadecimal number. So I know when I go to Flash, or Flash or Dreamweaver, or Flash, Illustrator or Photoshop, I know exactly which of those 256 colors I'm using. If I wish to add a border, I can select the default align. It gives me whatever information I need to know about that image is here. Okay? Now, if I click next to it, and you'll see there's a little, should see a little flashing cursor here somewhere. If I just start to type gibberish. There we go. There's some gibberish along the bottom here. So when you click next to there, we're adding text. And with the text selected, you'll also notice the format changes in the Properties panel. It tells us, is there a format here? Or are we using headings? Headings are important to people with disabilities. A heading 1 is the strongest, and all of these can be edited and changed. A heading 6 is the weakest, and it's the smallest. And when their reader reads these, so for heading, this would be a headline. It will, and I've never heard one of these, I'm only guessing, is that when someone who is visually impaired reads these, or the reader reads this, it reads it with much more force and probably louder. And then with subtle ones, you know, the heading 6 at the bottom, subtle, or for basic text, could be a heading 3, it will read at a different, you know, tone or a different volume. So that's why these can be important. We can also set up our own style sheet in here, and we're going to get to that, so that when you do go from page to page, in order to maintain that consistency in text, to make sure that all of your headings are the same size, the same font, same color, we can do that. And that's what is related to CSS here. We can also specify the size from here. We can specify the color from here. We can specify the alignment, whether we want it left, right, centered, right, or justified. If you wish to add an unordered list or an ordered list, things like that, text indents, we can do things like here. When you do add a link, and it's pretty easy, if I want to turn this into a link, you highlight the text, and I can link to another page that I have here, browse for the file. I can also, we'll get to this more later, we can point to the file by clicking and dragging to it. I don't have any other files to select at the moment. Or I can simply click in here. So if I want this to go to my personal website, I can go put http://www.kmart66.com. Okay, so let's actually change that in here. So this is that. So it would be and these are the default settings for hyperlinks. You can see it's this ugly blue and it's outlined. Okay, so as soon as you add a hyperlink, that's what it shows. I also mentioned targeting. Since this is going to an external website, maybe I want to select here and I want blank. It's the top setting here. Blank lets as soon as you click on this, it opens a new window. If you, by default, leave it alone, it will do self. Parent could be, or for top would be if we use frame sets, which we're not going to use. They're not really used anymore. Okay? And if I want to see what this looks like in a browser, I can make sure that it's saved. And I'm going to save this right now. I'm going to go File. I'm going to do Save As. And because this is the first page on my website here, I'm going to name it Index. And that's something that all of you need to pay attention to. The first page, and I will repeat this several times, try to. The first page that loads on your website, the file name needs to be index.htm or index.html. So when it's loading in the browser, that of all the files in your home page isn't going to cut it. It could say home page up here in the title, which is independent of this, but the file name has to be index.htm or index.html. And it has to be named in your root folder, or saved in your root folder. Now that it's saved, and if I go back up here and I'll name this is my home page or splash page. Whoops. Okay. Let me save it again. And now I can go to File, or I can go to here. I can preview. There's a couple of ways we can do this. I can go to File, Preview in Browser, and you'll notice that we have a number of them set, and you can edit the browser list, and you can make one your primary, one your secondary. So let's go ahead and preview this in Firefox, or I can come over here to this, and I can do the same thing. Let's preview it in Firefox. Let's go ahead and save changes. And because what you see here could very well look different in the browser, and that's what we're trying to do, is to maintain consistency. So if we look here, yeah, I want to make it my current. So it's loading that page. Oh, no, it's not. So let me go back. It was loading that. So it wasn't. So let me go back again. Preview in browser, Firefox. There we go. Now, because it's a placeholder image, it shrinks down. There's nothing to hold it in place. So it squished it down. But there's a clear indication that my page has changed. If I want to make sure that the links work, I click here. Notice that it's opening up a new window. And I'm going to cross my fingers and hope that it works. And it's not. So why is that? Let's close it. Let's try again. Oh, I put in 3 T's. That's why. There's the problem right there. So let's go back. Let's close this. Let's close this. Let's close this. Let's go back in here, and I put in 3 T's. So, if you have a problem with spelling or typos, it can be a problem. So let's save it again. Let's preview it in the browser. Link, and there we go. Notice it opened up a brand new window. It's now correcting it, and it should load just fine. Notice now that this is a visited link, that the color of the link has changed. All of these can be changed, edited, and it's having a hard time loading my page for whatever reason. It's not good. Why is that? There we go. So now it's loading okay. Okay? Yes?
How do you make the link go to a pop-up window?
We'll get to that later. There are, when you select here, we have, it's not over here. I need to get to this next. But we can go to Window, and we can look at not components, behaviors. And under behaviors, we can add, and it will be down here, Popup Message. And this is where you can load that. Again, they're nice, and we can do that, but be careful, because if someone has pop-up blockers turned on, they're not going to see it. And so what you may have to do is in some places that you write a little note. It says, please make sure that the pop-ups are located in here. Make sure that you have pop-up blocker turned off. And I noticed that with banking and that sort of thing. They will do that. If anybody do banking online, yeah, and they'll tell you, you have to have that feature turned off or you can't access your website. Okay, now let's go ahead. Let's go from the Properties panel. Let's go back and look at the page for a minute. And let's also look at, similar to Dreamweaver or to Flash, and also to Photoshop, we want to remember or be cognizant of the fact of the size of our page and how long it takes to download. And you'll notice in the lower right-hand corner here, it tells us the page size or the window size. It also tells us the page or the actual file size and how long it will take to download. I can change the page size from here, and we're going to use the 800 by 600 maximized here. And you'll notice that this doesn't give you a lot of space, does it? because it's not a true 800 by 600 because the 800 by 600 also allows for the top menu of your browser. So that you don't have, on your first page, you don't have a lot of space to put your information. It could probably be a little bit wider, or deeper, I should say, if you wish. But do not make it any wider than what you see here. Okay, so I want to go by, we could go as high as that. Now, how do you change the 1K setting to, or 1 second? Because as you're building your page, you will notice that the file, as the file size gets larger, it will take longer to download. Does anybody remember the seconds that I said for the first page? Last week? 10 seconds. You really want to try to keep it 10 seconds or under. So to change that, we need to go to Preferences up here. And we can look at accessibility. Here's the general settings. And for our purposes, we can leave most of these intact. We can leave it alone. Code, make sure all that's done. Code format, code hints, code rewriting. A lot of this stuff is here. CSS styles, which we will get to. Fonts, where do I want to go down here? Let's go to my site. Status bar, there we go. Here's the status bar. This is what I want under Preferences. If there's a custom size that I want, I can put that in here. You'll also notice the connection speed down here is 56K per second. That was similar to the default selection we used in Photoshop, and I would keep it at that. Unless, again, you're designing for art directors or people with T1 lines, then you can change it. But if not, and you don't know who your target audience is, or you have a general idea of who it is, then keep it at the default 56K. And that will give you a pretty good indication of the experience that people will get. Okay. Lots of things we can customize here, more than you just want to know. Okay. But this is good to come up here as well. But this happens to be in Preferences, and this is the status bar here. And I'll just leave this alone. If you want to put in your own custom size, we can do that. So that's the information down here. If you wish to zoom in, things like that, it allows us to zoom without changing the page size. That's important. Again, holding down the Option key allows us to zoom out. We can have rulers visible or not. We can bring out guidelines if we wish or not. Similar to Photoshop and Illustrator, they're not a bad idea. Keep rulers up or visible. We need to go to, let's see, where is it? It's up here somewhere. View, that would be it. Rulers, show. And if we turn that off, there aren't any. I like having them visible. It's just my personal preference. So under View, Rulers, Show. Some people also under View like having a grid behind it. Show Grid. We can always change the size of the grid to help you lay it out. And these do not publish. Okay, so there's lots of features that we have here. Added functionality over here. One of the things that we just looked at were behaviors that you wanted to add a pop-up window. We can add rollovers from here. We can add all sorts of things from over here. We can start our own cascading style sheets. We can import cascading style sheets from here. An important one that you're going to want to look at all times is this one. Your files, your assets, and if you use little snippets of code. These two are really the most important. Your files, so any files that are in your root folder will show up here. If you also, you want to see under assets, that would be any images, colors you've used, any links, meaning URLs, if you've used Flash, if you use Shockwave, movie files, any script so on and so forth. Any templates, all of these will be found in here. And they'll all be in your root folder. That's why when I emphasized the other day, the root folder, that was really critical, because anything, if it's not in here, it won't find it. And that is in part, you know, if I wanted this instead to link to a new page, oops, I didn't want to do that. Let's turn off. What am I doing? Let's turn that off. Let's go back to here. There we go. Okay. So if I decide to change my link, or if I want this link to something, I could easily select a file. And with this selected, I mean, I only have the one index file, so it would be linked to itself. But with this image selected, here's the link. I can click and I can drag to one of these here, and it will link to a page in there. And this can be pretty handy. And this is what I want to talk about shortly, is that we're going to create a splash page for ourselves, and we're going to save it. It will be our index page. And we're going to upload it, and we're going to test it to make sure that everything is working okay, and we can see the revised page on our website. Okay, everybody with me so far? Sort of? Let me get rid of some of these. Okie doke. So, everybody with me at the moment? Because I'd like everybody to follow along with us. And then that will be the end of my lecture for today, because I want to make sure it works for everybody. I want you to open Dreamweaver, create a new HTML page, and I want you to save the file as index.htm or index.html. Just a blank piece of paper. Okay? Now, yes?
Put it in the root folder?
When you save it, it should automatically put it in the root folder. So make sure, okay, let me back up. Let's beep, beep, beep. I got to back up a minute. Let's go, let's make sure here under Site, Manage Sites, that you have your site listed here. If it's not here, which I don't think it will be, make sure your flash drive is in there and import that STE file that you were supposed to save the other day. And it will have, then it will place that information in here. So that really is the first thing. So the under Site, Manage Sites, make sure you have the information, the site information there. Once it's there, now we can go ahead and we can save our page. So I'm going to go ahead and File, do a File Save As, and it already will know that it's in my root folder, Lauren Miller 2, index.html. Save, and I'm going to replace the old one. The index file is the first page that loads on your website. It's either called Home or Splash Page. Now, with heading 1 selected, centered, you can use whatever font you want. We have default font here. I'm going to pick Verdana down here. These are the limited typefaces we have to choose from. Size, I'm going to go all the way up to 36. Color, over here. Let's pick a nice violet. I mean, you can make whatever color you want, okay? This is just me. And I'm going to put it, type in here, Lauren's. Just click in there and type Lauren's new website. and I'm going to hit the return key a couple of times so it's down here. That's all. And just to spice it up a bit, I'm going to change the background color. To change the background color, I'm going to go to Modify, Page Properties, or hit Command J, and you'll see under Appearance, it will say about midway here, Background Color. Background color, I can pick from any colors here, and I'm going to pick this kind of orangish color, and I can apply, and there it is. Looks pretty ugly, but that's okay. It's bright, good contrast. Reads, might be a little bit taxing on the eyes. I don't know that I'd want to use that as a background color. I'm going to pick a different one. I said, who cares, but I guess I do care. So let's pick one here. It's a little bit more subtle. This one isn't quite so harsh. A little bit easier on the eyes. Your eyes aren't going to fatigue quite so much. And I'm going to save it. Now, with the page saved, I can preview it. So I don't think there are going to be any surprises here, but I can say preview in browser now, and this is what it's going to look like. Notice that the guidelines went away, the grid went away. Lauren's new website is centered in here, some basic text, nothing fancy. That's it. This is my first page to my website. And what you might want to do from time to time is to preview it in all the browsers that you have loaded on your computer. And at home, what I recommend is that you would, if you're going to do a lot of web design, that you have multiple browsers loaded, multiple versions loaded, meaning obviously all the current versions, but also go back a few versions too. A lot of people, once they buy a computer and Internet Explorer comes loaded on it, they don't want to change it. They don't want to upload it. They don't want to update it. They don't want to make any revisions to it. So that might be a part of your target audience, that they don't like tinkering with their computer and they have a browser version that's 2 or 3 versions old. So is your website compatible for their browser? Okay, it's saved. It looks pretty good in the preview. Now I'm ready to upload it. And so I need everybody's eyes up here, because this is how you're going to do it.
Where did you preview it?
Huh?
Where did you preview
You can either do it here, right here. It says Debug, Preview in Browser, or you can go File, Preview in Browser here. Now I have several selected, but you can we can create or edit browser lists, and we can add them here. Firefox, I want the primary. Safari, I'll make my secondary. Actually, Internet Explorer should be the secondary, because most people still use it. Now I'm ready to upload this. To do this, this is what you have to do. Okay, with the Files panel visible here, do you see this little button to the left, connects to remote host? And remember when we were setting up your account, I said click on that button to test it, to see if you get the green light, to make sure it works. Well, when I click here, it's connecting, and I should get a continued green light to show that I am connected. Now what I can do, you'll see that over here in my local files, I have index.html here. You'll notice that these little arrows here next to it, that I can put files or I can get files, upload or download. I want to upload this file to the server. So now I click on this up button, and there are other ways that we'll be doing this on Thursday. So I'm going to click this, and by default you get this message. It's important that you see this. It says put dependent files, and I'm going to select don't show this message again, and I'm going to select yes. Dependent files are anything that you have attached to the page, and later on you will have Flash images, you will have images from Photoshop. You will have, could have a movie file. You could have a cascading style sheet that you are attaching. Those are all independent files that need to go with that page. So I like doing it by default because oftentimes the more elaborate page you create, there is always that possibility of forgetting one little thing that you updated or needed to include and it isn't there, and then you get a broken link. This takes care of that for you. It knows what files are linked to it and what it needs, and it will automatically update it. Even if it's redundant, it doesn't matter. At least they're all there. So now what I can do with this file selected is that I can put it, I can upload it. And I said synchronization information cannot be found. I'm putting, okay, it may overwrite. That's okay. I'm going to say yes. I'm overwriting because I do have an existing file there. So I'm just going to say yes to all because I'm starting over for this class. I did one last time. It's there. How do you test it? You go to and you open up the browser. So let's open up the browser. And now I put in the URL. That's why it's also important to put that. This is Lauren-Miller. Whoops, gotta make sure I type it right. Oh, come on. -Miller.tripod.com. And when I hit return, it's going to that website, and lo and behold, there's the picture or the page I set up. However, yeah, there we go. It's loading it. And now you get to see what the ugly looking. This is what you have to contend with Tripod. You notice that the ads at the top, ads at the bottom, they do not go away. There used to be a workaround, and it doesn't exist anymore as far as I know. They gave you the option when you were creating your site, said, instead of putting them on your page, is it okay that we have pop-up ads? But now that all the browsers can block pop-up menus, it doesn't help them. That's how they make revenue, is by giving you this free space on their website, but every time people click on it, and it generates ad or revenue for them by people seeing the ads. That's how Google makes its revenue, by the clicks. And there used to be click farms, and all kinds of people were they had people sitting there clicking on stuff, and then they automated it and stuff to try to generate all these clicks to make revenue for them. So you can see by even hitting the return a couple of times, it centered this a little bit lower than what I wanted. But I am going to have to separate, I'm going to have to, when I look at this, and we'll talk about it more Thursday, is that what colors, based on the ads that are there, what colors do I need to use? How do I need to lay this out? What kind of text do I need to use? What kind of images do I need to use to really set this apart from the rest of this? Because it's really very hard. Okay, but it's free, okay? And then when you, the other thing that I want to say too is that once you get this designed here and you have all of your files in your root folder and they're saved locally, and you have the money to have your own dedicated server somewhere else, you paid somebody, or you discovered, okay, I have an Earthlink account, so I know now where to upload my files. You can change that information on managed sites and upload all of that information onto the new one, and it will work beautifully. It will be just fine. You could have multiple servers if you wanted to. Okay? So you're not doing this for naught. You don't have to recreate your pages. They'll just be put up to a different server where you don't have to deal with ads, and everything should work splendidly. The other advantage too is that if you have Dreamweaver at home, okay, and you've worked on a page here today, and you go home and you've forgotten your thumb drive, you lost it or whatever, and you want to work on that page. Well, then what you can do is we can go back to Dreamweaver, or let's say you're halfway around the world and you want to work on the page. if you log in, if you open up Dreamweaver on your laptop, you're connected to the internet, you're connected and you're managing this site and you're connected to it, we can download everything too. And you can bring all of that information down to your local computer, edit it, and put it back up. That can be wonderful, it can be horrendous. It depends on who you're allowing to work on your website. Most websites are worked on by teams, the large ones. And there are settings in Dreamweaver for checking in and checking out files, things like that. And you can make notes, say, you know what, this is so-and-so, I worked on this such and such page, and at this such and such time, and these are the changes that I made, these are the things that still need to be done. You can also determine when people check in and check out, you know, who is allowed to, who isn't, what they're allowed to do, all sorts of things. So they're under here, there are lots of other things that we can do. A lot of these here, under these menus, are a duplicate of what you see here, of these tools, or what you see down here. Okay, so that's as far as I want to go today. I want to make sure that everybody has their account. I've given you kind of a simple tour of Dreamweaver to get you far enough to create your own splash page, to upload it. Make sure that when you type in the URL from any browser, that it's visible. And if you can at least do that, then you're on your way to designing a website that's functional.
What I want is to see my name on the web.
What do you mean your name? Like www dot whatever?
Yeah.
You have to buy that from a company. And that would be, remember I talked about GoDaddy? Buying domain names, that's where you would have to buy it.
I can buy them.
And they're about $10 a year, something like that. That's how much it costs for a domain name. Okay? Okay, let me turn off the video camera.